Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the second session of a series of deliberations that we are having on the occasion of India Rivers Week 2021. Many thanks for joining in today. And as you remember, on November 8th, we had a discussion around polluted rivers and fisheries. And as you'll remember, this year's theme is healthy rivers, fish and fishers, and how all the three are connected to each other. Today's session, we are going to focus on captive rivers, and this is primarily looking at infrastructure and its impact on fishers and fisheries in Indian rivers and wetlands. So we have an esteemed panel today. I wanted to welcome our moderator, Parinita Dandekar. We have Mr. Abhijit Prabhu Desai from Rainbow Warriors in Goa. We have Dr. S.P. Biswas from Dibrugarh University and Dr. Dilip Kumar, the former director and VC from SIFI, Mumbai. And we are also, we'll be joined by Michelle Thame from WWF US a little later. So I'm going to kickstart the discussions, just few pointers to be put on the table for further discussions. And as I said, the theme for today is infrastructure. And Shama, if you can just put up the slides there. India takes pride in saying that our fisheries production has increased many times over the last few years, and particularly the inland fisheries. But when you actually go into the details of it, you find that it is actually the reservoir fisheries that has contributed significantly, but the actual fish production from rivers and wetlands have declined. And very interestingly, a working group formed in the preparation of the 5-year plan, 12th 5-year plan, found that the health of rivers are getting impacted because of water diversions and also the infrastructure like dams and hydropowers, which has had the biggest impact on the riverine fisheries. It also found that, if you could just go back, it also found that floodplains, it offers a great potential for riverine fisheries and also livelihoods of fishermen who are dependent on it. And it also mentioned that around 1.2 million hectares of floodplains can be protected and conserved if you were to be serious about riverine fisheries. It found that this area, the water spread area in wetlands and floodplains, are shrinking, and that's also a matter of concern. Next slide. So we are primarily looking at river fragmentation here. Three aspects of spatial aspects of river fragmentation. One is the longitudinal, that's upstream, downstream connections, that's dams, hydropower, water infrastructure, which actually breaks the continuity in flow of water, sediments, and biota. The second one is around the lateral connectivity, which is around embankments and the river fronts. We've been hearing about the embankments as an option for flood control and flood management, and we have been also hearing about the impacts it has caused on people and their livelihoods from agriculture point of view as well as fisheries point of view. The last one is the vertical one, which is again quite very well known in terms of the groundwater depletion, the degradation of the wetlands, which has actually reduced base flows in many of our rivers, which are also aquifer. So this is primarily what we are going to discuss going forward. Why the rivers are getting fragmented and how the decisions can be turned around by bringing in more knowledge about fish and fish migration. Next. Again, you're familiar with this. In one of the earlier India Rivers Week discussions around Ganga, we discussed this. This is produced by Intact, and all the red dots are the dams and other water infrastructure which are bringing in breaks in the connectivity and diversion of flows. Next one. When it is overlaid with the navigation ports, groundwater abstraction, terminals, interlinking, and all those things, you'll see, it's kind of a red network, and where there is hardly any space for the river to leave. So this is kind of the scenario that we are staring at, and there are several studies and maps for both the Western Ghats Peninsular Indian rivers as well as the northeastern, that's Brahmaputra. How future infrastructure is going to come up. And in fact, I just wanted to recall that in 2018, there was a study published by WWF along with 30 other institutions working on rivers, a global assessment of the connectivity status of rivers, and it found that less than 30% of the long rivers only only travel from its source to destination. So the scenario is not very different in India as well. So most of the rivers are not reaching its designated destinations. Next slide. So there were a couple of very interesting studies on impacts of dams on fish migration. One is a very popular and very well quoted study on the Krishna estuary, where dams have been constructed. There is this Prakasham barrage and water diversions happening, and the scenario is that upper part of the estuary is dry in summers, and Fishery has found that this kind of an intervention has led to the disappearance of carps and catfishes and many other species of fish. So essentially what's happening is, because of all the diversions that we are doing, one, the river is not able to perform its functions in terms of transporting water, sediments, energy, and biota. And at the end of the day, the estuarine health is also getting impacted. And we have a panelist who's going to talk about how inland waterways or inland the rivers, the estuaries, and the marine systems are connected. Similarly, in Faraka, this is an analysis done by Fishery again. How the yield of hilsa has dropped significantly at the upper reaches in Allahabad because of the Faraka barrage. So there are several number of these studies, but the key question is, what is it that we are doing to address this? Next. The question also had been asked around the efficacy of fish ladders, and there are a number of fish ladders that have been tried out in India, the Narora barrage. There are other systems as well, but there are enough evidences to show that these are not effective in terms of its design, in terms of the knowledge that has gone behind the designing of these fish ladders. So quite often these stay as water conduits, which is not serving much purpose in terms of transportation or facilitation of migration of fish species for which these are designed. Next slide, please. Again, a fantastic analysis by Santrab some years back around three systems, three fish passes, has shown that there are three or four issues. One, the size of the fish ladder is not adequate or good enough for the fish to navigate and negotiate from upstream to downstream. Second, there is hardly any flow in the fish passes to facilitate the transportation, and the maintenance is another important thing that we are finding, that it's badly maintained, that it cannot be used by fish to migrate upstream and downstream. Next, please. And Fishery way back in 2008 again looked at it is again quite important that it was about 13 years back this analysis came out. It looked at various types of fish ladders that are available not just in India but also outside in different dams. And what they say is very, very important to understand. We do not know, when we design fish ladders, we do not know what target fish species we are trying to design the fish ladders for. So that essentially shows that there is a lack of understanding on the aquatic and fisheries diversity, fish diversity in the rivers which are dammed. And this again brings us to the question around the whole decision making and design of structures in our rivers. Second, again, the size issue, as you have seen in the earlier slide, limited width of the passes in comparison to the large width of the rivers. inadequate information on the population size of the species, and lack of regular monitoring and maintenance cost of these fish species. Though there is there can be questions around this high maintenance cost. Why high maintenance cost is mentioned as a reason, but definitely regular monitoring is an issue, and maintenance is an issue in some of these fish ladders. Next. The other issue which I want to highlight here is that, around flows. Way back in the beginning of our India Rivers Week initiative, and I remember one of the addresses by Professor Ramaswamy Iyer, where he said that the first right of the water is that of the river. So the river should have the first right for its water. And currently, when you look at it, whether there is a structure, whether it is hydropower or whether it is a barrage, there is hardly any emphasis given on the environmental flows requirement. And quite often, this is kind of not adequate to maintain the ecosystem functions that the river is supposed to perform. So the whole debate on connectivity also takes us to the question on how, as a country, we will give priority for our rivers to flow freely and abundantly in times to come. Next slide. While we were putting this session together, we were also talking about, are there free-flowing rivers that are still existing in our country? The information is very, very limited on this, but talking to communities and talking to people who are working on rivers, we feel that, okay, there are many. Maybe they are not documented. One of the most documented rivers, Agnanashini in Karnataka, maybe it's one of the last free-flowing rivers. Then Simsang in Meghalaya, Parnita has worked extensively on that river. We've been looking at some of the rivers in Uttarakhand. Some of those very small, tiny rivers are still in first order or second order streams are still remaining free flowing in this in the state of Uttarakhand. So the question here is that, shall we not try and understand, what are the last remaining free flowing rivers in the country, and how do we protect those? And Rajiv Raghavan is unable to join today as a panelist, but he always says that there are few number of rivers in the Western Ghats which are still pristine and free flowing, which needs to be protected. This is something that we want to also discuss going forward in this session. Next slide. Coming quickly into the issue of lateral connectivity. So we've looked at the longitudinal connectivity, but the lateral connectivity issue brings us to the floods, floodplains, and embankments. A lot had been talked about, and a lot of plans, both in Brahmaputra floodplains as well as in Bihar, has happened. And we also know how communities had been resisting the drive for flood embankments in some of these regions. Next slide. One of the key things here is that a lot had been talked about it, and way back in 1983, while we were looking at this, one was looking at the impact of embankments on fisheries. It's way back in 1983. Fishery has done a study in North Bihar in relation to some of the river valley projects in Kosi, and they found that there is a significant impact at that time on the recruitment of fisheries in the floodplains. And they also said that it has led to a huge decline in not just the fish diversity, but also the size class of the fish which are found in the floodplains, wetlands, and the ponds, and to the extent of 75%. I found this very, very interesting, that and they had a set of good recommendation on how the scenario can be reversed. And it's important that we revisit some of those recommendations and bring into the discourse on how we can revive inland riverine fisheries, particularly in the context of today's discussions. Next slide. Again, flood zoning, river regulation zone, it had been part of the discourse for many, many years. And I'm many of you are aware of this. And, way back in 1993, there is this Indian National Committee on Irrigation and Drainage who said that floodplain zoning is important. And they are saying that it's an essential part of the river, and therefore any development activity has to be compatible with the river risk that is involved. And it also said that encroachment shouldn't be allowed. And similarly, next, there was a working group constituted by the Nidhi Aayog for the 12th five-year plan. Next slide. It again talked about the reverse right of way and saying that we need to have floodplain zoning so that the rivers can swell and rivers can actually enjoy its right of way. Then in 2016 we have many of our partners who were involved in it to help draft a river regulation zone notification, river conservation zone notification in 2016, but it has not seen the light of the day. So it's very, very important. And again, I want to go back to the draft national policy on inland fisheries, which again says that protection of wetlands and floodplain wetlands are very, very important. So if we don't have some legal protection, I'm not really sure how we are going to go ahead and realize the real potential of inland fisheries in these floodplain wetlands. But not just the fisheries part, but it also is important from flood cushioning and other point of view as well. So this is one area that we look forward to discussing forward and coming with something concrete in terms of guidance and direction. Navigation and waterways, Manthan has done a great amount of understanding, study and analysis on this. Waterways bill earmarked 111 rivers and river stretches for navigation. 63 are not viable as per the latest reports of the Inland Waterways Authority. But what's important is that based on Manthan's study, fishers are impacted because one, they are not allowed to get into the vessels, into the rivers when the vessels are moving. Second, the fish productivity is decreasing because of the turbidity increases that is happening in the river because of the barge movements, the vessel movements, and also because of the dredging that is happening. Similarly, in 2016, an expert appraisal committee of the MOEFCC asked the National Thermal Power Corporation and SIFRI did a study from Haldia to Farakka, which found that there's a sharp decline in fish diversity, and over 25,000 fishermen are dependent on it, and their livelihoods are impacted. So the thing is that there are enough evidences on how some of these large-scale infrastructure is impacting the fish as well as other aquatic biodiversity. For instance, the impact on river dolphins because of navigation and waterways is also documented by various researchers. Next one. So as I said, this is a series of webinars, and we have 2 more sessions coming up on science, knowledge and data, and we also have one on the governance. And I'm sure that there'll be more discussions around some of these aspects which you're seeing on the slide. Interestingly, there was this working group report I'm frequently quoting that it called for engagement of the fisheries bureaucracy in river management, because they said that if you want to improve riverine fisheries, you need to get into river management, and that's why riverine, the fisheries fraternity should be engaged in this, and it called for coordination and synergies. A lot of work plans were made, allocations were made. We'll hear from one of the panelists on how this is getting implemented. The National Inland Fisheries Policy again talked about the same thing. We know that the inland fisheries is a strategic priority on the Pradhan Mantri Matsya Sampada Yojana. We also know that there are these river rejuvenation programs across the country, including Namami Gange and others, and the wetland conservation programs happening. How are they looking at fish? We are really not sure how the aspects of fish migration and aspects of connectivity are taken into account in some of these areas. And last but not the least, EAC, on River Valley projects and their decision making on infrastructure, including hydropower, need to be really looked into. And I'm sure that some of the panelists will throw some light into the aspect of how we embed knowledge of fish and aquatic biodiversity into some of these aspects. Once again, many thanks and a warm welcome. And I wanted to introduce the moderator for this evening. She's a very well-traveled, very popular writer Parinita Dandekar. And Parinita, welcome to you. And I'm really grateful to you for joining us so early in the morning from Austin. Parinita is engaged right now in a fascinating book on Indian rivers, and which is likely to come very soon. She's associated with Sandra and had been traveling extensively, documenting rivers in India, impacts of infrastructure, but she had also been looking at the positive stories on river management, whether it is community-led river management or other initiatives. She had been looking at it. But I want to hand over to her by saying that she had also been trying to demystify complex issues around rivers. And I'm reminded of one of the articles that she had written on river songs, where she found how S.D. Burman and Hazarika had been in love with rivers and how they captured their emotions with rivers in their writings and songs. So Parinita, warm welcome, and I hand over to you. And thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Suresh, for the very generous introduction. I deserve not even half of it. And thank you for all the panelists for being here. It's a very diverse and a fascinating panel. We have, as usual, we have a mix of academics, we have a mix of people who have experienced the bureaucracy around fisheries management, and we also have some very important voices from the field, which is imperative in discussions like this. Just to set the context of this discussion, like Suresh very succinctly presented, the impacts of dams on river and fisheries in India have been devastating. The problem is they've also been unheralded because river and fisheries are absolutely, they are just not looked at. We think that the entire impact of dams on fisheries is still underaccounted, hugely underaccounted. SANDREP and a number of organizations in around 2012 wrote a letter to the MOEF about their sanctioning processes around dams and fisheries. We know that dams are one of the biggest impediment to riverine fisheries. We also know that India has one of the largest number of dams in the world, third largest. And while doing so, the governance has not been looking at river and fisheries at all. In terms of inland fisheries production, whenever we talk of fisheries, the general idea is marine fisheries are the most important. And I think Rajiv, if he would have been there, he would have highlighted it here, usually highlights it very well, that we think that marine fisheries is the most important sector. But India, the production of inland fisheries is nearly double that of marine fisheries. So, and that's something that we generally tend to forget. But out of this, though we have such a remarkable network of rivers and history of rivers and literature of riverine fisheries, for example, Tita Shektir Nadir Nam, a very amazing Bengali novel, which was later adopted by Ritwik Ghatak into movie, is based on fishermen and fisherfolk livelihoods. But despite this, and despite inland fisheries being more than double the production of marine fisheries, what is the contribution of rivers to it? Nearly less than 10%. And I'm very happy that one of the people who drafted the 12th five-year plan on fisheries, Dr. Dilip Kumar, is with us. Because of this plan, we came to know that even the actual participation in inland fisheries sector is much more than the marine fisheries sector, and it is completely, unheralded, unaccounted, and we ignore it as easily as possible. The country right now, I am in US and then the neighboring Canada, some of the biggest changes in water governance are happening due to fisheries and due to native fishing rights of Native Americans on fisheries of salmon. And we are from a subcontinent where fish like hilsa and mahasir are iconic. They've been changing cultures, they've been molding cultures through decades. But what is the attention that we are giving to hilsa or mahasir? Nearly nothing. They do not feature in any of the plans or any of the processes as we go forward. Whatever little importance that is there is for religious reasons, that is for gangetic dolphins, but that's also negligible and absolutely notional. SANDREP looked at, in last few years, SANDREP looked at the environment clearance around hydropower and irrigation dams in India, we looked at 157 projects which were given clearance, out of which only 6 projects were told to have fish ladders or some mitigation measures for fisheries. So what is the most favorite mitigation measure when a dam project comes to the Ministry of Environment and Forests? The most favorite measure is to have fish hatchery and then sanction all the dams. So the fisheries departments in states receive crores of rupees in compensation when a dam comes up. In addition, they get money for putting up hatcheries. Now, do we know the actual efficacy of these fish hatcheries either for the river or the indigenous fish species or for the fisher folk? There have been nearly no post facto studies. MOEF nearly has no will or the capacity to look at what happens to its recommendations. So fish hatcheries are, we think that they are a big scam actually. Sandip worked with some of our colleagues from Himachal Pradesh. They looked at some of the fish hatcheries and we say that nearly no snow trout is actually being restocked into the rivers by the fish hatcheries, for which by now hundreds of crores have been spent. We've been looking at EIA and EMPs. So very interestingly, the Ken Betwa EIA actually said that it's great to have a canal because the fish will then get a shortcut to migrate to Yamuna. This was from an EIA of Ken Betwa, which was sanctioned, and no problem was raised about this subject. Then we had the EIA for Gundia, HEP in Karnataka, an extremely fish diverse river, which itself has new fish discoveries right from that location. And the EIA said that there are no endemic fish species from this region. Subansiri Basin Study, Subansiri River, which is a tributary of Brahmaputra, is one of the only tributaries of Brahmaputra with its own resident Gangetic dolphin population. But the basin study not only did not look at the impact of dams on the dolphin, but it completely, it did not even mention the presence of Gangetic dolphins in Subansiri. There are several such examples. Nearly all of the EIAs and environmental management plans, they would like to just brush the issue of riverine fisheries and the lakhs of people that depend on riverine fisheries. They would just like to brush it under the carpet. I would also like to point here that we had in our first session a representative from CIFRI, Central Inland Fisheries Research Institute. Now, CIFRI always has a representative in the Expert Appraisal Committee, the EAC, which sanctions dam projects. And we've been writing extensively to CIFRI, but CIFRI has not been raising any of the dam issues when it actually sits in the decision-making place. And we would really like to, appeal to them that they need to take their job of Inland Fisheries Research Institute much more seriously. They are also acting as consultants for dam projects. And we see that in dams like Namjangchu in Arunachal Pradesh, that job is also not being done to the satisfaction or to the advantage of the fish and the fisheries, and not the dam companies, which should not be the case. There is a lot to talk about. There's a lot to talk about free-flowing rivers and dammed rivers, and I'm again extremely honored to be here with this illustrious panel. We should go on with our first speaker. Our first speaker is Abhijit Prabhu. I'm always very thrilled to have Abhijit to talk because he comes from Goa. Not only is he a fantastic community organizer of communities and fisher people in Goa, he has extensive knowledge about the ancient river systems of Goa. And I find it really very, very important. He's the General Secretary of Rainbow Warriors, established in 2014, working towards communities and to protect their rivers and natural resources. He's been working for decades now on environmental struggles in Goa. It may be mining, deforestation, or the inland waterways and nationalization of rivers in Goa. So over to you, Abhijit. And so what we would also like to know from you, or what everyone would like to know from you, is a number of states like Bihar they are having problems with nationalization of rivers and inland fisheries. So, so can you tell us how inland waterways is affecting Goa rivers, and what exactly are communities doing about it? So that will be our first discussion point. Over to you, Abhijit.
Yeah, uh, the the rivers in Goa are uh, are uh, are actually in a sense man-made, because Goa is, if you really look at it historically, it's the Western Ghats, leading into the Arabian Sea, and that's all that was to it. Uh, but maybe about 4,000, 5,000 years ago, the indigenous communities have worked on the rivers, have done a whole lot of extremely unique and massive task of creating these rivers by building these embankments made from the local clay and whatever's available in the riverbeds, and creating channels which are now our rivers. And the rest of the sea or the wetlands has been beautifully manicured and managed into massive areas of cultivable areas where paddy is cultivated, and alternatively fish is also cultivated. And there is a huge system of sluice gates which operate automatically based on the tide, and allow the water into the now into the wetlands, which are now managed by the local communities to create a fantastic, highly productive environment where fish, rice, coconut, everything is cultivated. And at the same time, the ecological and environmental aspects are pretty much maintained of the river. And this has really been the source of Goa's economy and the livelihood for lakhs of local citizens. The rivers have been managed by the local fishermen and farmers who regularly maintain the earthen embankments and sluice gates, and look after the rivers, literally. And now, in the midst of all of this, in January 2016, we suddenly found Mr. Gadkari coming to Goa and announcing that he's going to dredge the estuarine areas of one of our biggest rivers, Zuari River, and dredge it from the Vasco Bay, where the river finally meets the sea, where also Mormugao port exists. They wanted to dredge it from 14 to 19 and a half meters to bring in Cape-sized vessels. When this was started, we went to the courts and got it stopped, and forced the government to now hold public consultations, public hearings before carrying out any of these projects in our rivers. And that was a big victory in 2016. But even more important was the fact that it opened our eyes to some big, massive, sinister plans as we see them to convert these fantastic, life-giving and living rivers into actually dead navigation channels to carry coal from foreign countries into Goa, and then to transport it into the hinterland in Karnataka, where massive steel plants with capacity up to 100 million tons of steel per year, and power plants up to 20 gigawatts are proposed. And all of this we found only through RTIs and through a whole lot of research. Despite resistance from the government, we managed to get hold of documents. Of course, some of the documents of the National Waterways and Inland Waterways Authority were available on the website. But all of this showed us that a fact which was hidden from us, that 6 of our rivers had been, as we call, nationalized, which is the biggest shocker for all of Goa, because we consider our rivers to belong to us. We have an ancient Gaonkari system which recognizes that half of the river belongs to the village on one bank, and the other half of the river belongs to the village on the other bank. And this idea of these rivers being taken under the control of the center is completely rejected by every single Goan. And this is the fundamental start of our resistance against these plans to use our rivers for shipping. And we have managed to, the people have managed to stop these projects. The resistance is very clearly scared the government, and rightly so, because there are lakhs of people who are dependent on these rivers. And if they go ahead with their plans to convert our rivers into navigation channels, they will have to dredge the rivers. They'll have to replace the natural embankments, which are actually breeding ground for a huge number of, crustaceans, fish and everything, into concrete walls. And then the adjoining Khazan lands, where we have our amazing agro-pisciculture systems of sluice gates and water bodies and paddy fields, will be used for stacking coal, eventually destined for Karnataka. And at the moment, the government is spending tens of thousands of crores building huge highways to transport this coal from our rivers and our villages to Karnataka, which is all being resisted on the ground by the people. And today, I think we are in a very strong position, because out of 189 panchayats in Goa, the people have forced more than 100 panchayats to resolve that we completely reject the nationalization of our rivers. We completely reject the idea that they'll be used for shipping. And the struggle goes on in different forms at the moment. Hello.
Yeah. So as usual, Abhijit, that's very invigorating to know. We had a few questions about this, because this is an initiative from which a number of states where inland navigation is being pushed, a number of states can learn lessons. We know that you've been working on mapping the fishery zones in the rivers and estuaries of Goa with the communities. Can you tell us a bit more about this exercise, what it entails, and how you're going about it?
Sure, yeah. The coastal zone management plans for Goa were never made after 2011, and under pressure from the National Green Tribunal, the Goa government eventually got NCSCM, an organization based in Chennai, which we in Goa consider to be completely cowboy outfit, sitting there to help corporates take over our rivers. They prepared these coastal zone management plans for Goa, which were put up for public, scrutiny and response. And in 2019, mid 2019, and the moment we got to see these plans, we were all totally shocked, because the plan showed that there was not a single fisher in any of Goa's rivers, which is absolutely incredible, considering that every few square meter, every few linear meters along the bank of the rivers, you'll find some fishing activity. And it didn't show a single fish breeding area, when our rivers are teeming with shellfish, with all kinds of fish, with oysters, with window pane oysters, protected species, and a whole load of amazing biodiversity that's fitting for a Western Ghats river, and the plan showed nothing. In fact, the plan showed the entire wetlands, the Khazan areas, which are completely under use by the locals, as a part of the river, and hence we believe that this was all done in as a shortcut to get control over the entire river and the adjoining lands, so that they can be handed over to the coal transportation corporations like Adani, Jindal, and Vedanta. So who are the key players here? Immediately, we went to the villages along the rivers, and we have been in their struggles for various issues in the past. And when we shared these plans with the villagers, everybody unanimously across Goa agreed that no, we must make the real plans showing the real facts and data about our fish and our fishes, and also about our rivers. So we took the help of various colleges across Goa. We got students living in those communities.
Is there a problem with Abhijit's connection?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think he's back.
Okay. Abhijit, can you unmute yourself if you're back?
Yeah. Okay, I'm back. Yeah. So yeah, we went to the villages. Every single village, we got hold of the elderly fisher folk. We got hold of all the local stakeholders, and with the help of college students, we mapped every single feature of the river, every single fish breeding.
It seems like a network issue again.
Network issue, yes. Just when he was in the most exciting part of the presentation and talking about, I hope he's back soon.
He's rejoined. I think his audio is still not connected.
So I have actually talked with some of the fisher folk in the rivers in Goa where Abhijit works, and the way they are connecting and the way they are mapping, the way they have knowledge about the estuarine fisheries richness, it's fantastic. They also very strongly say that there is a connection between the riverine fisheries, the riverine health, and the fish catch that they get in the sea. So they are very clear about the connection between the rivers, estuaries, and marine fish production. And this is coming from the fisher folk. So that sort of knowledge is just fascinating. I think that sort of knowledge of connection between rivers, estuaries, and marine fish production is missing even from most of the academic studies that we come across. So I really hope that he can come back soon online.
Maybe we could go to the next panelist and come back when Abhijit is around.
Yeah, I think I wish he could have come back, but when he comes back, we can again join with the part that Abhijit was talking about. Can we, Professor Biswas, can we now have Dr. Shama Prasad Biswas as the next panelist? Hello, Dr. Biswas. Yeah. So can you unmute yourself also?
Yeah, it is good evening.
Good evening.
Hello.
It's good evening, sir.
Good evening. It is quite dark here. It is quite dark here in Dibrugarh. You know,
okay.
We are the easternmost town.
Yes. But thank you so much for joining. It's very dark here also. We are pretty much on the west, but it's very dark here too. So it's an honor to introduce Dr. Shama Prasad Biswas. He's a retired professor from Department of Life Sciences from Dibrugarh University, and he's worked for last 4 decades. It's a fantastic stretch of time looking at hydrobiology and looking at fisheries in the Brahmaputra river system. Brahmaputra river system is one of the richest riverine systems, fishery systems in India, which has not only biological and biodiversity importance, but a huge cultural importance also. Abhijit, it's great to see you back. I'm really sorry. We moved to the next panelist, but after he's done, we'll come back to you so that we can hear the most interesting tidbit of all about the community mapping. We'll come back to you. Coming back to Dr. Biswas, he's been working on the Brahmaputra Basin for 4 decades. Since past 4 decades, Brahmaputra Basin, from being at the center and being an extremely biodiverse hub of fisheries, we now see that even in fish markets of Assam, you get frozen fish from Andhra Pradesh. So this has been the evolution, and there is a number of developments planned and happening along Brahmaputra in terms of embankments and also the upstream dams. I hope Dr. Biswas will throw light on all of these aspects. Dr. Biswas, could you give us a brief introduction of the fisheries in Brahmaputra, the people dependent on Brahmaputra fisheries, and how do you think are the embankments affecting fisheries in Brahmaputra?
Okay, right. But before that, I just want to add something. Yes, Poinita, you are right. While talking about the dolphin, river dolphin, it is my pet subject. Since 90, I am working on this thing also. Yes, in the EIA report, when I was inducted in the committee in 2006, the EIA report of Lower Suansuri Dam, there was no report of dolphin, no mention of dolphin. But we know that my students, they are working, and in 2006, we have recorded 29 dolphin just below the dam, and actually around 30. And also, I want to add here, it is not only the river Suansuri. There are at least 2 other tributaries of Brahmaputra where the dolphins are seen, even now. That is, one
Which
is Kulshi River. Kulshi River. One is Kulshi River. Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. One is Kulshi River near Guwahati. It is just 35 kilometers from Guwahati city. Kulshi River. At Kulshi River. It is just very near to Guwahati city. Another is Dibru River. Even now also, any time, even now also, even in the winter season also, you can see dolphin there. So at least there are, apart from Suansuri, there are 2 more rivers where the tributaries, in fact, of Brahmaputra, where you can see the river dolphin. Anyway, coming back, since I am, Suresh Babu told me to talk about the dolphin, because I have actually prepared my lecture and summarized my lecture. This around the impact of embankment on fisheries, livelihood, and like this. Now, you know, there are about 5,000 kilometers of embankment, all constructed after 1970, including about 700 kilometers along the Barak River. Now, Barak River is a part of the Brahmaputra Ganga Jamuna system. Now, this embankment definitely helps to check the flood beneath, provide temporary shelter to flood affected people, and also check bank erosion, which is one of the most crucial problem, bank erosion. Bank erosion and siltation. If you want me to identify 2 problems of Brahmaputra river system, there is a bank erosion and siltation. The most that also affect the fishery. Anyway, but embankment also accelerate other forms of channel modification. For example, shifting channels and impact of land use pattern in riparian areas. Now, what is the impact of embankment in fisheries? Now, embankment act as a major hurdle for spawning the riverine fishes, including major carps. as the brooders, they cannot freely enter the spawning grounds, the adjoining bill, locally called bill, Shari in Assam, for breeding. Now, way back in 1975, when we were students, at that time, Dr. Vishwagopal Bhingran, his first edition of the equity-making book, Fishes of India, published. And if you go through, Dr. Dilip Kumar is there. At that time, he was a very young scientist. And we met him in Calcutta. Probably in the inauguration time or two. At the time, of course, we are students. Anyway, so in that book, you'll find that there are in Guwahati, in the Paltan Bazar and the Jan Bazar market, 30% of the commercial production of Assam from Brahmaputra system is the Indian major carp, Rohu, Katla, and Mrigal. Now I have a published paper in 2006 where I mentioned it is not even 2 to 3% now, not even 2-3%. Okay, you will find the Rohu, Katla, Mrigal in the Digrugarh, Shivsagar, Jorhat market, but all are coming from either from fishery, culture fishery, or from Andhra Pradesh. You were right. So what is actually? Actually, it is just coinciding. The declining of fishes, capture fishery. Yes, Poitanta already pointed out that now the inland fishery, when we were students, we are studying the marine fishery in the actually about 2 to 3 million ton and 1.5 million ton was the inland fishery. Now it is double. Okay, out of the 8 million ton, average 8 million ton production, almost more than 5 million ton is coming from inland fishery, but maximum is from the aquaculture. Only 10%, as Poitanta pointed it out, only 10% is from the riverine fishery. Anyway, secondly, the impact of the adverse impact of the monsoon, the embankment is the flushing out of floating weeds. Now, all the wetlands in Assam, which is heavily, like in Bihar, heavily infested with macrophytes, especially water hyacinth. Now, because of the construction of the embankment, the flushing out, the annual flushing out of the water hyacinth is not possible. It's not possible. To come back tomorrow, day after tomorrow, we are going to Baghdad. The Supreme Court hearing is there. That means I am also in the committee. So that actually is the one of the most important wetland in Upper Assam, Maguri Motapum. So that is totally infested with water hyacinth. Now there are also the embankments, and flushing out of one part of the thing, it is not possible. Similarly, the Mare Bill, I can name many bills where actually these wetlands are turning to bog now because of eutrophication. And naturally, the fishing ground is restricted and fish production is coming down. So this is another negative impact. And also the lack of auto-stocking. And all Brahmaputra has some 57 major tributaries, but there are small tributaries. For example, Kulshi is not included in the major tributaries of Brahmaputra. But these are actually connected with directly or indirectly with the Brahmaputra river system, at least during monsoon period. Now, because of the construction of the embankment, the auto-stocking actually it is hampered, and in that way it affects the capture fisheries and livelihood of thousands of fisher folks in Assam. Now, like in Bihar also, the flood control device, that is the embankment, these days they are more problematic. Of course, more problematic as water logging in different areas. That's not a flood because regular bleaching, these embankments are very old now, more than 50 years. And breaching of embankment is very common. And because of this thing, there are waterlogging events even after receding flood for 1 week, 10 days, very common. It is very common. You will find that water remain there, and so many other diseases come, dengue and there are other things, tropical disease. Actually, it is a mosquito breeding. It becomes a mosquito breeding ground. Now, as far as the impacts of the hydropower, now, as it is already said, some 160 river projects have been proposed, mostly in Arunachal Pradesh. And that I want to outline some of the impacts on riverine ecology and not other riverine ecology and the fish and fisheries. Then alteration of riverine ecosystem in both upstream and downstream is expected. The downstream will have much lower flow for most of the day, while there may be flood-like situation during night, and this may cause bank erosion in the downstream. So this is the thing, and that is the thing because I have seen their map, and from 2006 to 2016, I was in the committee of the lower country, and that I want to share that 80% of the construction work is completed. Now, because of the Supreme Court order, it is actually it is stalled some, but the repairing work is going on. So up to 2016, 80% of the work is completed. Now, another point is the dial and variation.
Sir, we specifically wanted to ask you the impact of diurnal fluctuation also on the downstream fisheries, and how does, in a system like Brahmaputra, how do the upstream dams which are planned nearly hundreds of kilometers away from Dibru-Saikhowa National Park or Dibrugarh or the mainstream Brahmaputra, how will the diurnal fluctuation still affect the fisheries in Assam?
The Subansiri, Lower Subansiri Dam, in no way it will impact Dibru-Saikhowa National Park because it is in the downstream.
Yeah.
And we are, this Dibru-Saikhowa National Park, it is in the eastern part. More
no,
eastern.
I'm talking
it is
about the dams in Arunachal downstream.
Now, Subansiri Dam, actually it is in Arunachal Pradesh. Some Arunachal Pradesh. Exactly, it is in Arunachal Pradesh. And from the downstream, from the dam side to confluence is 130 kilometers. 130 kilometers. Now, as per the EIA, Subansiri, that's the Monsoon River, monsoon time, it is about 8,000 cumac. The water discharge is 8,000 cumac during monsoon. And while in winter month, it is 350 cumac. Now they have 8 turbines there, and together they require some 2,500 cumac water. Now, during monsoon, it is no problem. Now, how it will affect, I am telling you. During monsoon, it is no problem because once at that time, the average discharge is 8,000 cumac. But problem is during lean month, when the average discharge is only 350. And for rotating one turbine it requires some 250 cumac. So 2,500 cumac water is required. So they propose they will, during daytime, they will release only 6 cumac. Mind that only 6 cumac. The river will not get even the knee-deep water. And dolphins, they need at least 3 meters of water. Dolphin. Now, during picking hours, after 6 o'clock, they will release the water. Now, 350 is the natural flow. I'm telling you about December, January, what will happen. Natural flow is average 350 cumac. And in addition, they will release 2,500 cumac when all the turbines will be in operation. So it will be more than 3,000, nearly 3,000 cubic. It will be flood-like situation. Now, dolphins, they are millions of years they are staying there. So they know the flood pulse. They know the water discharge. Now, when in December, January, it will be flood of situation, they will be terrorized. They will be terrorized. They will just leave the place. And also during the construction, we have this, you know, the downstream, the cooperative fishing. Suresh Babu was cooperative is common, but now fishing actually it is greatly hampered because the even pH, some of the pH of the water it exceeds 8. No water tributary in the Brahmaputra River system. It is 7.2 or 7.3 in any system. Rather, it's slightly it is acidic in some of the tributaries. But because of the cement and all other things, maybe I did it our presumption. So because of the pH is more 8.2 that we have recorded. Then also there are water is very much turbid because of the debris coming from the construction site. As I already told you, the 80% work is completed.
Yes, thank you so much, sir. This is very important information about dolphins in Subansiri. We also would like to ask about the upstream dams planned in Arunachal, like Lower Demwe or Lower Siang or the Dibang dams, Dibang multipurpose dams. How do these upstream dams planned in Arunachal Pradesh, how would they affect downstream fisheries?
Because specifically all this that I am not worked, I am not this thing. Because Subansiri, I know two of my students and since for 10 years I was in the committee. So very frequently I used to go there between 2006 to 2016. Now I am taking that whatever this thing, there will be some impact. There will be some impact, but specifically I cannot say. But that's why we propose that there should be cumulative impact. Before that, before giving the clearance, before that there should be cumulative to what will be the effect of the livelihood, fisheries and other fauna. Okay, that I am telling you the Subansiri Dam, it will not affect the newly constructed, newly inaugurated national park in Assam, 7 national park, or the Deep Park. But other thing, your Siang and other thing, it may. Right, because specifically I cannot say because I have not worked on this. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. This is very important information. You very succinctly put out what are the impacts of Subansiri dams as well as the embankments on Brahmaputra fisheries. We come back to you with questions, but we'd just like to briefly go back to Abhijit to wrap up his presentation. Abhijit, are you back online?
Yes, I'm back online if you can hear me.
Great, Abhijit. Can you please take over from where you were talking about the fascinating bit of the villagers and the college students and researchers came together to make fisheries maps?
Yes, confronted with these, NCSA maps which showed nothing. The villagers and, like you said, students and experts and all of us together went around, in each village, mapping every fishing area, every place where canoes are parked, or every sluice gate, every fish mending area, every infrastructure of the fishers, as well as every single fishing net which is registered or not registered with the fisheries department was mapped on. We used a system where we used GPS, mapping, and then converted that using QGIS into GIS maps, which which were created for every single riverine village in Goa. And so every village through its Gram Sabha and Panchayat approved these maps, corrected them, and sent them back to the government. And today the government is confronted with these maps prepared by the people, which show every single fishing net, every single fish breeding area, where the shellfish breed, the mudflats, where the meticulously mapped and sent back to the government. Unfortunately, even though the government conceded to an extent that yes, they don't have the data, they got NCSCM to revise the maps, the coastal zone management plans, and the revised maps were again put up for public scrutiny, where our embankments, our sluice gates, and our khazan lands with pisciculture and farming were all shown. But shockingly, none of the fishing areas, none of the fish breeding areas still are shown on the government maps. So our struggle is going on. Right now, we are asking the fisheries department and the government to please send their officials to the villages. They'll be welcomed by the fishers and the villagers, and will be shown every fact on site. But they refuse to come to the site till today. And, the fear is that they will again send maps showing no fishers, no fishing areas, no fish breeding areas back for finalization, so that the interests of the shipping companies are upheld. And we are going to fight this, and make sure that we don't lose our rivers and our fish to these corporate interests. And the struggle is on, and an equally important struggle is on the socio-political level, where we see how the fishers are completely marginalized, are oppressed, and are made to become invisible. We are in the midst of organizing all the fishers of Goa to stand together and fight. And the good part is that other people, other villagers and other residents of these areas are also equally in this struggle with us, which basically the entire population of Goa is going to stand and fight this. And so, that's where we stand at the moment.
Thank you so much, Abhijit. This is really fantastic to know. Lots of lessons for other states also from this. Just a last question, if you could be very brief about this. You've seen damming also in Goan rivers. You've seen damming by Karnataka. You've seen damming by Maharashtra on some of Mandavi's tributaries. And you've also seen damming in Goa itself. What do you see the impacts of this damming of rivers on the riverine, estuarine, and the marine fisheries? I mean, we're looking at the connectivity, and how do you think damming affects this connectivity of fisheries, and how do you see this damming affect damming or the various interventions affecting the livelihoods of fisherfolk in Goa? If you could be brief about this, but it'll be nice to have this on record.
Yes, we had a major dam constructed on one of the tributaries of Zuari River. It is called the Lim Dam. And this dam today was actually originally, proposed with 90% of the water to be used for irrigation. But today we see that this dam, the water from this dam all goes to industries and urban areas and to five-star hotels, etc. Is therefore it's always been a big lie, a fraud on the people. But most the biggest impacts of this dam is obviously the the loss of the natural flow of fresh water into the estuarine systems, which has drastically impacted the fisheries of Goa, of Zuari River, which is one of the bigger rivers in Goa. What we have seen is there's a massive decline in fish production as a direct impact of Selauli Dam. And it's also resulted in increased siltation in terms of when the silt is released from the dam, etc. It is affected the fish breeding areas, equally importantly, the impact is seen all the way out into the marine areas. For example, the Zuari River meets the sea at Vasco Bay, and Vasco Bay is an amazing place where till the dam was constructed, thousands of dolphins would be seen in the bay every day, and massive abundance of fish. But the moment this dam has been created, the fish production is reduced. Our dolphin population has been completely decimated. You just see now a few along the coast, and it's the experience of the fishers of of Vasco, where this bay is, that as a direct impact of the fishery of the dam, the marine fish catch also has been affected. So while we don't have studies to corroborate what we find on the ground, yet it's inescapable. The consequence of a dam is a direct reduction of fish, fish catch.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you so much, Abhijit. This has been an enlightening presentation. Thank you. I'm sure you'll the audience has lots of questions to you. We'll come to that after the panel discussion. Thank you. So moving to our next speaker. Our next speaker is Ms. Michelle Tyne. She is the Deputy Director, Freshwater for WWF US, and she leads a very fantastic initiative, which is known as the iconic Free Flowing Rivers Initiative of the WWF network. Free Flowing Rivers, India is also blessed with several free flowing rivers despite being so highly dammed. And we are really thrilled to know more about this from Michelle. She was a key contributor to the development of Freshwater Ecoregions of the World report, and also contributes as a special advisor, IUCN, on Freshwater Fish Specialist Group, and is a member of Freshwater Protected Area Task Force. So I think it would be wonderful to understand the global scenario, what countries are doing right, what countries are doing wrong, and what lessons India can learn from them. Thank you so much, Michelle. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Parinita. It's wonderful to have the opportunity to be here this afternoon with this great panelists that you all have lined up. I appreciate it. And let me start by sharing my screen. Are you able to see?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. Yes, so I was asked to give a global overview about work on river fragmentation and the impacts on the world's fishes. I'm going to start off with an overview of some more recent analyses around the global status of free-flowing rivers, and then walk through what that means for freshwater fisheries, and then feature a few solutions and best practices. We've heard some of those already in the earlier panelists. So first, how is a free-flowing river defined? I'm not going to read off the definition, but just to reiterate a lot of what's already been said, for a river to remain fully free-flowing, it needs to be connected in 4 important ways. that upstream, downstream, or longitudinal connectivity for movement of fish and other organic matter, the lateral connection for the water to be able to flow out onto the floodplain and come back into the river. The temporal connectivity is critical for fish. The seasonal ebbs and flows and the signals that come with those flows. The vertical connectivity for the river to be able to connect with groundwater and ultimately to aquifers. This is a work that WWF and colleagues have done in the last several years that was published in Nature, mapping free-flowing rivers globally, and those are shown here in blue. The rivers in red are those that have been lost or are fragmented, and you can see that around the world there are still concentrations of where free-flowing rivers remain, but many of the rivers are already highly fragmented. Overall, we've lost about 1/3 of long free-flowing rivers. And if we look at what is planned, in gray are existing or under construction dams, and those in red are the planned dams. And you can see that these are concentrated in many of the places where free-flowing rivers remain. Of particular relevance and no surprise to all of you is that swath of red dots in the Eastern Himalayas and all of the dams that are planned. I will say this is a global data set, so it only gives a snapshot of what's going on. I think there's about 4,000 proposed dams in this global data set. What's of particular concern as well is that many of those proposed dams, over 500 globally, so about a quarter of, no, less than that, but a certain percent of the 4,000 are planned in protected areas. And that's particularly concerning because protected areas are meant to be set aside to protect all of the biota within them, but that is not always true for the aquatic species within them. And so as we look to a future or a present where we've already lost a lot of free-flowing rivers and where many are yet to be dammed and further degraded, we see that there's a range of values that these systems provide. Everything from cultural and recreational values to healthy floodplains, rich areas for biodiversity to still remain, floodplain agriculture, sediment transfer to downstream floodplains and deltas, a critical one that's often not in the mind of decision makers. And then of course, again, the importance of fisheries, which is what we are here to concentrate on today. So what are the implications of the loss of free-flowing rivers for freshwater fish? And I think we've heard already today many of these, but just to summarize, we know that dams block migratory routes of freshwater fish. Migratory fish are often a very important component of the fisheries that are important for livelihoods and as a source of food for local populations. They also fragment the populations themselves. So there's the genetic exchange is not possible the way it would be if those populations were able to interact. They can limit access to spawning, breeding, and feeding grounds, of course, for migratory fish, but for all fish that have their native range within the location of that particular dam. They can change river flows in multiple ways, and of course, cause loss of habitat availability, access to floodplains, and so on. They can eliminate spawning or other life history cues as that seasonal ebbs and flows gets dampened down or changed in other ways. And at the extreme, they can dry out entire stretches of rivers. The sediment flows I mentioned a little bit earlier, but those as those change within the river system, it changes the geomorphology of the river itself and alters habitat availability for fish. And then one, again, that is often not considered is the temperature changes that come, especially with large dams, where there's a big reservoir and the releases below the dam can be either colder or hotter than they would in a natural setting. So what this means, and what we see when we look at the numbers globally, and we look at those freshwater fish populations that really most depend on river connectivity, is these really big declines since 1970 in terms of species abundance for different fish populations that have been tracked around the world. 76% decline for migratory freshwater fish populations and 94% of freshwater megafish populations. So very, very dramatic, similar, I think, to the graph that Suresh showed at the beginning for the Hilsa. And it sounds like there are similar studies in India, but in the US and Europe, where dams are very, very prevalent. Recent studies have documented a correlation between dams and fish extinctions, with fish species extinction rates being over 100 times their natural rate in these two regions. So that's a pretty dire portrait of what the impacts can be and are. And so the question arises, what solutions or best practices exist as we're dealing with this very difficult conundrum? So as we look around the world, a few come out or stand out as ones that I'd like to highlight here. The first is dam removal. And there's a movement underway, particularly in the US and Europe, where dams are being removed. Outdated or inefficient infrastructure is being taken out to reconnect rivers. In Europe alone, there are an estimated 1 million river barriers, and it's been estimated that at least 100,000 of those are obsolete or not being used for their intended purpose. In the US, nearly 1,700 dams have been removed to date, and there's big efforts underway to continue that. Just at the moment, there's an infrastructure bill being debated in the US Congress and Senate, and that includes money for what is being called the three R's: rehabilitation, retrofit, and removal of the nation's 90,000 dams. And where dams have been removed, there's been extremely, in many cases, very interesting and successful impacts on the native fish, with some huge rebounds being documented. For example, on the Penobscot River in Maine, river herring have rebounded from about 20,000 fishes being there before dam removal to in 2016 nearly 2 million of those individuals being documented in the river. Another option, and one that we've seen play out in the Mekong region, is dam moratoriums. This photograph is of the site of the proposed Sanborn Dam in Cambodia. It was one of two main stem dams in Cambodia that were under consideration. And last year, the Cambodian government came out and declared a 10-year moratorium on any new dams on the main stem in Cambodia. And this is, I think, a good option. They made this decision because, one, they were facing drying of the rivers from climate or changes in the hydrology due to climate change. And so there was a real concern that even these large dams would not produce the power that was promised, given the changes in hydrology as the climate continues to change. And then secondly, the real significant impacts that would be felt mainly and most hard in the most difficult way by local communities, given the high reliance on fisheries. Another example is related to durable river protections. There are a few of these around the world that are specific to rivers. The example that I'd like to feature here comes from the US, which is the Wild and Scenic Rivers Act. It was the first national law put in place that was specific to rivers, and that was done in 1968. And it really originated as a mechanism to keep rivers free flowing. To date, there are about a little over 200 rivers and about 13,000 miles that are under this protection. It's a very, very small percentage of the nation's rivers, though, less than 1/3%. But where they do exist, they have been an effective mechanism for keeping those river stretches free flowing. And then my final example is water reserves. And this is one way that an application of environmental flows has been put in place. And the example here comes from Mexico, where the Mexican government has established or created a mechanism to establish these reserves that is basically an amount of water that is set aside based on careful analysis of how much is needed to keep the river free flowing or healthy and functioning. It also, depending on the specific basin, it also respects the needs for human access to water for both for domestic uses. And so one outcome, and pictured here, is the Usumacinta River in Mexico. It's the longest remaining free-flowing river in the country, and it has a reserve that's set aside of 93 to 98% of the annual flow is in the water reserve for this particular river, depending on where in the system you are. And as long as this reserve is respected, it will, in effect, keep the river free flowing long into the future. And I think that's my last slide. Yes, so thanks so much for the opportunity to share with you. I look forward to discussions and questions and comments.
Thank you so much, Michelle. This has been, it's like a breath of fresh air to see so much happening in so many countries. Some of the countries which are as populated and as complex as India, it's great to see that even they are actually operationalizing these principles into practice. Will you just had a small question? Can you tell us, how do you translate? You talked about free-flowing rivers. India also has some free-flowing rivers which have spectacular biodiversity, ecosystem goods and services. But how do you translate this message of protection of free-flowing rivers into a parlance that is understood by the decision makers, especially for complex societies like India, where the pressures on river and water is so high?
Yeah, so I think it is a very contextual response. So I would also be very interested to hear the thoughts of other panelists. But our experience in different contexts has been starting with who you're trying to influence and what they care about. And that often boils down to in many cases, it's about energy production. And that's what's driving these dams. And so if there are other alternatives that can be pursued for that same energy and offering those up, then, and you can also at the same time make a strong argument for the values, the multiple values that the river itself provides, then that can be a very powerful pairing of information, right? So it's not just about saying no, but also about, and this is what you're going to keep that is going to have consequences if the river is dammed. So I hope that makes sense. But talking about those two in tandem, I think, is a very powerful approach.
Thank you so much, Michelle. It has given us a lot of food for thought, and also something that we would definitely like to take forward in India. Thanks again for a fantastic presentation.
Thank you.
We move ahead to our next speaker. We have a very illustrious speaker with us now, Dr. Dilip Kumar. Hello and welcome, Doctor. It's really great to see you, because I have been in my papers on fisheries and riverine fisheries. I've always been referring to the 12th five-year plan report on fisheries. I also had a presentation in front of the Parliamentary Standing Committee on Fisheries, where I very strongly used the report, and it's a great honor that we have with us someone who actually worked as a chairman for the working group for the preparation of the 12th five-year plan for fisheries development. And not only that, he was also acted as a chairman for drafting the National Inland Fisheries Policy. It'll be very interesting for us to know from you itself what is the status of the policy and how it's going forward. Dr. Dilip Kumar is a retired director and vice chancellor of Central Institute of Fisheries Education, something which is so important and still not highlighted enough in India. Sir, it's really a great honor and a pleasure to have you with us today. And with your experience, I'm sure you would shed light on how does the bureaucracy look at inland fisheries and riverine fisheries. So I would like to start this discussion by asking you the question about, so the government of India has created a Department of Fisheries, a dedicated Department of Fisheries in 2019. There have been so many schemes also coming up for fisheries. How do you see this development? What do you see the role of this department? How do you see this department looking at the 12th five-year plan which you headed? And so what do you see the impact of this department on riverine and inland fisheries?
Thank you, madam. It is really a great opportunity for me to meet all of you, interact with all of you, and so rich resource persons we had. I know some of them, especially Dr. Biswas. I know since long, and he is the person who has worked on dolphin. And recently, I think just 1 year back, no, about a few months back, we organized an international workshop webinar on dolphin, and it was mainly because we used to get a lot of news in just in newspapers that due to the COVID, now the aquatic environment has improved in our river system, and because of that there is greater visibility of dolphin. So many places that you see news came that you see now dolphin is also seen in this area. So because of that, I think it was high time that we should really invite all of them, and we had a webinar, and it was I think one of the organizer was Aquatic Ecosystem Health Management Society in Toronto, who is in Canada, who is also just to see coming with, they have a journal in that. So now a special issue will be coming, and Dr. Biswas was one of the major contributor. Now about just coming to your point, I tell you that you see, prior to 12th plan, earlier we have seen that major thrust in all this 5-year plan was on marine fisheries, then including its infrastructure, then also say welfare of the fishing communities, and after that it was the second focus was on aquaculture, or you can say that, well, equal focus was on aquaculture. Really, there was nothing on the inland fisheries, and also that you see floodplain wetlands, it was not there at all. So that time just we saw that you see we need to have a balance between marine and inland fisheries, and then in inland fisheries we really emphasize, because every time the focus is mainly focus is enhancing production and productivity of fish. So inland fisheries, well, river was the area where it was. We recognize that you see that there is so much of deterioration that it will be very difficult to really increase the production. But at least we should focus should be how to rehabilitate this river, how to really just to see salvage its biodiversity and the population in that, and then for protection, say production, the emphasis one was on reservoirs. But in the same, so after that, you see, the fund was made available. That time it was we wanted some 6,000 crore, and then I think it was possible to get only 3,000 crore, and so not much were really just to see. Although we had a program, I just if you see that what are the program identified under that 12 5-year plan was something like you see identification of riverine stretches for conservation as sanctuaries, primarily for maintaining broodstock population and genetic biodiversity, maintaining or improving genetic biodiversity. Then replenishment of depleted stocks uh, through river ranching, and in selected stretches, conservation, protection, breeding ground of commercially important fish species, habitat improvement, and uh, community mobilization for increased participation of local communities in all these activities. So this was all these programs were there, but I would like to frankly tell you that really, if even now also, now it is, you can say that plan is out, the second one, and under now just we have a PMSSY, Prime Minister Matsya Sampat Yojana, so about 20,000 crore. Never in the past, it is really historical that such a huge amount is now available for the development of fishery sector. So in that PMSI earlier program, it continued, and then but it was mainly limited to ranching of some of the rivers, and then that was supported. Now I would like to say that is not really supported by the PMSSI and others to certain extent only, but this Ganga, this Namami Ganga project, Namami Ganga program, this has really just to see given huge support for the improvement of riverine health, and also that you see, uh, say, building stocks in the river system. So they have a ranching program, and one of the biggest executor of that Namami Ganga uh, project is that ranching program is ICRC free. So since last 3 years, they have been stocking it, the ranching in different stretches of River Ganges. So almost 15 to 20,000 yearlings every year, day after tomorrow. No, yeah, on 15th, day after tomorrow, they are ranching in River Gangas in Allahabad. So this is the program, you can say that that was good. But one of the biggest impediment was there. If you are going to ranch, we need to raise these fingerlings from the local stock. So local stock. So uh, their activities mean how to just to see collection of these fingerlings from the wild, from River Ganges, then rearing up to brood stock, then breeding him, and then again rearing up to fingerling size, and after that restocking. But for that, they don't have really permanent structure or hatcheries for such program. So just to see, they are taking care of some of the local hatchery operators. So we are not really very sure that up to what extent that you see genetic quality has been able to maintain by these programs. So this is one. And really the program, you see that even if you see, if you come to see, one was certainly that you see the size has come down, availability has come down. Dr. Biswas has already told that you see even Indian major carp contribution in the total catch is almost 50%. But if you come to Allahabad and further, then it is still low. But after that, the most really frightening indicator is that you have a large number of exotics are available in the natural stock, in the river catch. Especially we have uh, common carp, and then Cyprinus carpio. Then also just we have some this uh, catfish, like exotic catfish, like Clarice garipinus. So these are just to see, and even tilapia also. So these are really frightening that these species, if they are there, these are highly invasive. Then we do not know that future up to what extent it is going to impact our native fish population.
Right, sir.
So,
Sir, but one question about
yes,
from all this, we've heard about this, and it's definitely a very alarming scenario. But looking at the 12 5-year plan, or looking at the your fisheries, the inland fisheries policy, which also you chaired, do you think any of, except ranching is just one part of the entire big puzzle, river and fisheries, do you see any of the recommendations being put forth by reports such as yours, which was constituted with such illustrious members?
okay,
Do
yes,
you think any of these recommendations are actually being implemented in
yeah.
practice? And if not, what are the issues why they're not being done?
Okay, so these 2 points are very important. The first one, that river ranching is one. The other one, we should understand that you see the vast, almost northeastern states. I think it is up to 70, more than 1.78 lakh hectare of floodplains are there, wetlands. That is very important. That is the lifeline of the riverine system, because these are the natural, just to see, abode for the broods of these different other small species, small size fish species, and this is the breed also for the breeding ground. And once it is inundated and connected with the river, it helps in stocking of the river. So that is really just to see very important, this one. So we had also programmed how to make use of rehabilitation of these uh, wetland, and just say how to optimize their contribution for the development of fisheries, just to see in the river system. And the second one, that these are also very, just to see, in your theme it is fish, the health of the ecosystem, health of fish, and also health of the fishers. So one health, I would like to, it is very important. So that way, you see, the wetland, especially that oxbow lakes are there, floodplains are there. So local fisheries, it contributes maximum to the local population in their food and nutritional security, and also for their livelihood. It is mainly because of this that Sakuntala, Dr. Sakuntala, she got that, you see, this year World Fish Prize. She got mainly for her work in Bangladesh, and also
Absolutely.
related to this thing only. So
Absolutely.
something has also been done in India after the 12 5-year plan, uh, especially related to river. This is also an area where something has been done.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Then,
Sir, just
but I would like to say why it has not been done. up
Yeah.
to really just we could have done a lot. So
Yes.
there are several issues. One of the issues that I have seen that you have mentioned the term bureaucracy. You have also mentioned 2-3 times. Dr. Suresh has also mentioned, and this is really a very, very important factor, which is really, it is going unnoticed, but it is really a critical factor. Just to see, we have now ministry at the central level. So because fisheries alone you cannot develop this sector, you need to depend, it is very much connected with agriculture, connected with rural development, connected with environment and forest, also that water resources alone in isolation this sector cannot develop. So it requires a lot of that, you see, collaboration with interministerial collaboration. So when now we have a fisheries minister at the center, fisheries ministry at the center, hope that you see they will take it on priority basis to just to see collaborate with different to provide, you see, at the interministerial support for the development of this sector, this one. But you see, you see the organizational structure, you see the institution. Most of these institutions are just very weak. They don't have capacity. At the center also in the ministry, we have one secretary and 2 joint secretaries. Okay, all the bureaucratic positions are full. And they think that, you see, this is all done. But there is hardly any technical capacity they have. Most of the technical positions, these are vacant and they are not looking for that. So until unless you have the technical capacity, then just you cannot. So this is too much of bureaucracy, I would like to say.
Thank you so much.
Similarly,
This is very important. Yes.
yeah, and similarly, then again, the same position is also in the state. Now the person who choose that, to see, I will for my entire life, I have selected, I will remain, I am committing to the development of the fishery sector. Now for them, all other windows are closed, and they continue, they work for, they work or they study for 10 years, 15 years, and after they come. But in the state departments also, you go and see 80% of the states, it is headed by a bureaucrat, full pure bureaucrat. Those, they do not have any domain knowledge. You can understand down the lines what type of feeling most of these, they are highly demoralized staff. So with that staff, under that, how does they can lead? This is one thing. About the policy also, in the policy also, you see, that the go on example was there, and then we could see the major, if you want to do anything, if you want to ensure any intervention in river system, it is the primary producers of that system, it is fishing communities. Without their cooperation, without their active involvement, you cannot really do anything. And for
Very true.
that, most of these departments, they don't have the capacity how to, that is social mobilization, how we are going to mobilize their participation, that they do not know, and that is also not their priority. So how just you can expect that, if you have an order, if you have passed that it has to be done, without their involvement you cannot execute. I would like to give you in this one example from Bangladesh, just to see our neighboring country. I would like to say, just to show that one, just to see, consider Assam and also that neighboring Bangladesh. It is Bangladesh just like one of our state. If you compare with Assam, their population is, Assam population is only 4 crore, about 4 crore. Bangladesh population is 16 crore, about 16 crore. You can say that 4 times of, just to see, pressure is there, population pressure already there. If you consider that, you see the resources like a riverine system or inland, I'm not talking about the marine. This one is almost more or less, say 1.5 times more, but there's Bangladesh is also 1.5 times more in area than Assam. But you see
Sir,
the production.
we'll need to keep it brief, sir. Sorry.
Yes,
Yes,
you
sir,
see
I
the
understand.
production is, say, we are producing from Assam, total fish production is about 4 lakh ton, 3.94 or something. And Bangladesh is 4.4 million tons, and excluding marine production. You can understand. There, just 1 minute more. We started a project, and Bangladesh also started a project. Our project was how to enhance that you see, how to rehabilitate Hilsa fisheries. There, we spent almost 22 crore. Bangladesh has also one project on rehabilitation of fisheries, Hilsa fisheries in Bangladesh. Our orientation was mainly that you see lab work and some research work, and so we have not involved really just to see fishing communities. And then we have completed 5 years, really no significant any impact on this one. Okay, we have been we have been able to show that we have a technology, we can breed and so on, but really it is not reflected in the field. On the Bangladesh, you see, their production was 2 lakh. Now it has come to 5 lakh. Not only double, more than double within 5 years. You see, because one more thing is there. Here in India, just to see, when you are talking about, we have different sectors, private sector, academic institutions, research institutions, and then we have a bureaucracy, development institution. They don't have, there is a trust deficit among these segments. So we have a, say, research institutes are there, but most of these bureaucrats, they would not like to just involve them, to consult them. So this is one thing. In Bangladesh, all of them, they have worked together. Uh, University, research institute, Department of Fisheries, and on the ground, entire fishing communities. And it was both from their side, voluntarily also they came forward. At the same time, there was really, just to see, very strict enforcement was there, so that they complied with the ban period. And because of that, Bangladesh has been able to double the production. It is really visible. And I would like to say the major contribution goes to the communities, fishing communities.
Absolutely.
So that
Absolutely.
is basic.
I think on that note, this is the most fantastic note which brings together all the issues raised so far in the entire panel, that it actually comes down to the communities. And I think you demonstrated it very lucidly. We still have a few questions to you, but I think we should start with our question and answer session, and we'll also get back to those questions to you within the session itself. But there are a number of questions which we think that need to be addressed now. We'll start with a question on river regulation zone notification. This is a question, I think, Manoj Mishraji, if you're around, can you take this question and let all the audience know about what is the status of the river regulation zone notification? So many of the panelists have talked about the importance of breeding grounds. Dr. Biswas talked about it. Dr. Dilip Kumar talked about it. Abhijit talked about it. And we do not have, it's been, river regulation zone has been on cards for such a long time. So could you please enlighten us about it? We will then come to questions for other panelists. Dr. Dilip Kumar, a few questions are left for you also from us, but we'll come to that as we start the discussions. Dr. Manojji, are you there?
Yeah. Thank you very much for inviting me
Namaste,
here.
sir. Yes.
Yeah, namaskar. You see, a lot has been said about the importance of floodplain and how the importance of floodplains in the context of fishery, and how the bifurcation of floodplains as a result of embankment, the loss of floodplains as a result of developmental activities. Am I not audible?
Yeah, we can hear you, sir.
So we can hear you.
Okay, yeah, because Dr. Dilip Kumar sent me a signal that
Yeah.
Slightly
Okay.
louder would be better.
Yeah.
Okay. Is that fine?
Yes, sir. Please go on.
Yeah. So the importance of the protection of floodplains as an integral part of river system is really extremely important. And this point has been made time and again by different agencies, by different people. And way back in 2002, a national conference was organized just on this. And Professor Brij Gopal, now late, unfortunately he died, he led this entire effort. And he also, as a matter of fact, he drafted a river regulation zone notification on the lines of the coastal area regulation zone. And it was a wonderful exercise that he had carried out. But as things happen, and as Dr. Dilip Kumar said, that if there is one bureaucrat who takes interest and when he is not there, then the whole effort actually falls flat.
Exactly.
And that is what happened initially. But by 2011, Mr. Jairam Ramesh, when he was the Union Minister for Environment, he actually understood the importance of this entire issue. And he promised publicly that within 4 months, river regulation zone will be started in the country. And few things started, but soon Jairam Ramesh himself was shunted out of the ministry, and then the entire effort again fell flat. Then in 2016, when Javadekar ji was the environment minister, and in his own constituency, when there was a big flood, and he realized that river regulation zone is really important, he made a statement in the parliament that by June 2016, river regulation zone would be in place. And this draft, again assisted by Professor Brij Gopal, had been vetted by the law ministry. It was sent to all the state governments from comments. The comments came back, but then again Javadekar ji himself was changed. And when Javadekar ji again came back later in 2020, 2019-20, then he was requested once again. See, everything is in place. It's just a matter of notifying it or putting it in the public domain for public comment. And then for some reasons, for some very strange reasons, he did not follow it up. Until today, now that we have a new environment minister, we continue to wait that the river regulation zone will take place. So what I'm trying to say is that effort that began in 2002, even in 2021, it has not seen the light of the day. So that's a sad state of affairs. We hope, and we sincerely hope that something will happen soon with the new minister actually meaning business in some way. Because and why it is so important? It is so critical because floodplains, as we know, is kind of, it is the floodplain where the life of the river actually happens. The living river is in the floodplains, not really in the flowing river. In the flowing river, you have the phytoplanktons and others, but the zoological life, the aquatic life of the river subsists only when the floodplains are safe and secure. That's one. And the second, of course, is floodplains are important for ensuring that the flood pulse passes away easily without making any much problems with the people. And the third thing, which is very important, is, and which Michelle also said, about the spread of the flood water, because it is the spread of the flood waters over the floodplain which recharges the groundwater. So if your floodplain is restricted, then you will not get the recharge of your groundwater. You will lose all that water, which will go downstream and spread there and recharge their groundwater. So floodplain as an integral part of the river system, extremely important for many reasons, but also for the fisheries, survival, restoration, and all that.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you for letting us know the exact status. It's very saddening, but not surprising, unfortunately, in our scenario. Next question is to Dr. Biswas. Dr. Muruganandam wants to ask you, I'm really sorry, we have a number of questions for the panelists, but we are really short of time and we just have to keep it to two questions now. Really sorry, the people who asked the questions can personally get back to the panelists, email them and have discussions further. I'm sorry about that. This question is for Dr. Biswas. What are Brahmaputra board's contributions so far to fishery sustenance? Have they had any contributions, and if so, what? Dr. Biswas?
Virtually no contribution. Brahmaputra board, actually, they think they are busy with the flood control and fishery development. I don't think it has their vision or agenda. No contribution. And actually, because Dr. Dilip Kumar, because of the time constraint, he actually highlighted many of the things.
Yes.
Many of the things pointed out because about the Hilsa fishery. And I'm tempted to show you one book recently published by World Bank, The Restless River. It is contributed by the authors from China, Nepal, Bangladesh, and India. It is all about the Yarlung Brahmaputra. It is a Brahmaputra fishery and everything culture. Because they think all the other participants in this thing, it is a 2021 publication, World Bank. Restless River. World Bank publication.
Thank you, sir.
There is no contribution. Actually, the policy maker, and I just want to highlight here, it is a people's participation.
Exactly.
People's participation. Other thing you cannot do. Only last 17th October, I visited Assam and Manipur border. That is a river visit. It is excellent because I echo this thing. Three things is important: health of the river, health of the fisher folk,
Yes.
health of the fish, health of the fish. And absolutely. And only thing is that people's participation. You cannot do anything. And I am 100% convinced. You have to make this thing that should be decentralized.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Yes. Next question is to Dr. Kumar. It's also to Dr. Biswas. I think Dr. Kumar can start off. Maybe Dr. Biswas can add something. It is by Sanjay Hazarika, and Dr. Hazarika asks you that can you comment on the contradiction between the high dams which are planned in Arunachal Pradesh, in so many parts of the country, and the endemic fish population and dolphins, which actually need significant water depth and flow. So
I think the best person to answer this question is Dr. Biswas.
Yes. Over to you, Dr. Biswas.
Well, when the dam concept was conceived to tame Brahmaputra River, way back in 16th, under the aegis of V.K.R.V. Rao, actually it was the flood control. Now what happened? All the projects, these are actually electricity generation. And I had argument with the other committee members that high dam will affect the biodiversity, the environmental flow. Even the Subansiri Dam, it is only actually if it is installed, there are so many ifs and buts. If it is installed, only 10 to 15% flood cushion is there. Only. So I am against this thing. Okay, I am against the high-rise dam because it will do more harm than good, like the embankment. Okay, I am not against the embankments. There should be embankments because no government can play with the property and life of the people. But there should be sluice gate so that the link ecosystem, the wetlands, they can be rejuvenated. They can be auto-stopped.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So I'm okay. If there is at all, there are the Arunachal, there are thousands of rivers. We do not know. There are thousands of rivers, small streams. So 10 megawatt, 15 megawatt, 20 megawatt. Okay, that can be done by after taking appropriate study. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Biswas. We have lots of questions coming in into the chat box and also from the audience. We are very sorry that we cannot take the questions now because we've already overshot the time which we had with us, despite having one speaker less. This is I think the richness and the complexity of Indian river and fisheries is reflected through this. I'm very happy. It's been a fantastically productive panel. It's very interesting that we started from an activist, a community mobilizer, then we went on to a professor, an academic and a researcher, then we went off to a global researcher and then to a bureaucrat researcher also. And all of them are coming to one particular conclusion that without people's participation and without actual lobbying on the decision makers, without having very effective advocacy in place, the fisheries concerns will not be reflected. Dr. Dilip Kumar has to add something.
Yeah.
Dr. Kumar, we have to keep it very brief. We've already
just one minute.
Yes.
I would like to read this one, that we need to ensure that all players of the fisheries sector, Department of Fisheries, Fisheries Ministry, universities, research institutes, private sector, entrepreneurs, farmers, they must work in harmony. Institutions are strengthened, capacity of these organizations and personnel built up, and concerns related to environment, sustainable development, SDGs, and equitable development through fisheries are mainstream for achieving the greater objective of fish for food, nutrition, livelihoods, and income. We need to take our steps together.
Thank you so much, sir. So we had Abhijit Prabhu who talked about the fascinating initiative of the Goans in mapping their fisheries diversity and how these actual facts are also being swept under the carpet and not being looked at while pushing for inland waterways. Then we had Dr. Biswas, who very succinctly talked about the impacts of Lower Subansiri Dam on the dolphin population and what is happening to the dolphin population and the related livelihoods and also the upstream dams and their impacts on Brahmaputra and the fisheries. We had Ms. Michelle Thyme from WWF USA who presented the global scenario and talked about the various initiatives about free-flowing rivers, which are also, and also she talked about dams, she talked about Mekong and dam moratorium, and also Mexico, which has similar problems like us, having water reserves for fisheries, something we can learn from. Then we had Dr. Dilip Kumar, who from his extensive work with the government says that the hope lies with the people. So I don't know whether to be happy or to be really scared with this thing that despite having such a bureaucracy, despite spending thousands of crores on fisheries, on ranching and breeding and reservoir fisheries, we still think, and having a different ministry for fisheries, we think that the future of river and fisheries lies with the people. It is a fantastic thing to think about, but it's also very scary and upsetting at the same time. But again, it has been a fantastic panel. We came to know a lot of things from you. Thank you so much. We wanted to give you all just a very brief 30 seconds possibly for one concluding remark and then conclude the session. So can we start with Michelle Thyme Michelle, could you come up with just one concluding remark from the entire discussion? We have to keep it very brief. Sorry.
Yeah, thank you. There are two things I'd like to emphasize. One is this cross-sectoral discussion that fisheries really cannot be fully managed in a silo, separate from all of the other impacts that are happening on it. And then the second, the power of the people and the voice, and raising up what the community benefits are and are at risk if harmful dams are planned that will affect those communities. Those two are my concluding remarks.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Michelle. It's fantastic. Dr. Biswas, very brief, 30 seconds, please.
Yes, for restoration of river health and everything, that one, if you just identify only one point, I will say it is that only the community participation. Only the community participation. Yes, if you just identify one point.
Thank you so much, sir. Very effective. Just one point, extremely hard hitting. Abhijit, can we come to you, please? Abhijit, please unmute yourself.
Yeah. The rivers and the people are one. You can't separate them. And, neither can you interfere with the natural free-flowing rivers. And this is not just for the people who live by the rivers, but for saving the entire world, because the interference with the rivers is primarily for activities that are actually, just aggravating climate crisis and other issues.
Right. Thank you so much, Abhijit. I think, Dr. Kumar, you had the concluding words that you said. Thank you so much. This has been a fantastic panel. I think we've ended with more questions than what we started with, which is the best indicator of a good session. Thanks a lot for being here. Siddharth, over to you if you have any wrapping up notes. Thank you.
Thanks everyone for joining today. Before we leave, I wanted to share the details for the next session. You can see on my screen the next session for India Rivers Week 2021 is scheduled for 17th of November, where we will be discussing science, data, and advocacy. We've talked about the issues that we are seeing. We talked about the possible solutions, but is there enough information? Is there enough data to actually drive this conversation? And what will it really take for us to get to a point where we can make more smarter decisions, intelligent decisions? So please join us on 17th November at 4 p.m. Indian Standard Time. For those watching this on the live stream or on YouTube later on, please register on the link which is shown on the screen. Thank you. That will be all from me.
Thank you, Siddharth. Yeah, I just want to take this opportunity to thank Suresh Babu from WWF, Neha Bhatbade from Sopicom, and Siddharth, there's been a lot of work going on the background, and these are the people who've been driving it. Manojji, who's always been our strong pillar. So thank you so much for all the work you guys have been putting in. It's really great to share screen with you. Thanks.